Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. Darren Mitchell here on it's a beautiful Wednesday summer's day here in Melbourne. But I have the pleasure of speaking with Rai Cornell, CEO and strategic marketing consultant at Cornell Content Marketing, coming in all the way from Texas. And Ray, you were telling me that there's been a bit of snow over there.
Yeah. It's still Tuesday evening here, but we had some snow earlier today, and it's my favorite time of year. So bring on the blankets of white.
That is amazing. Because when as an Australian, we look at Texas and we see, um, all the cowboys and stuff like that, and we don't
Yeah.
equate Texas with snow.
Yeah. We're at 3,200 feet altitude. There we go.
Altitude. Yep.
Elevation. So we get quite a bit of weird weather here, including huge balls of hail, and then we get snow.
Wow.
Yeah.
So potentially, are you saying that we might actually have a white Christmas?
Yeah, quite possibly. Although my husband and I will be in New York for Christmas. So if we
Wow,
get that here, we'll miss it. But I'm hoping for a white Christmas either way.
that is amazing. And look, we'll get into your story and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But as you're talking, then my wife and I went to New York. It was actually 1997, 1998. So we spent Christmas over there because our friends they were expats from Australia living in Jersey.
Mhm.
And we thought, oh, this is going to be fantastic. We'll have a white Christmas.
Yeah.
And it snowed on Boxing Day, the day after.
Oh
So
no.
we
You
went to
missed it.
Pennsylvania and did snow sledding and tobogganing
Nice.
in the snow. But we didn't quite get the white Christmas, but it was absolutely beautiful over there. And going through New York at Christmas time,
Hmm.
it's cold, but Jesus, it was picturesque. And I'm sure it's even better
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. I mean, that's gotta be such a difference coming from the southern half of the earth and having basically our summer during Christmas. I can't imagine that. That would be so topsy-turvy for my brain.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when we have Christmas in July,
Yeah.
and we and it snows every now and then where I live, just north of Melbourne, and it's great to have Christmas in July, but it's just not the same. And we
Right.
get all the Christmas movies, and we see all the Christmas movies from the States, and there's snow everywhere, and everyone's wearing the big woolen jumpers, and here we are in
Yep.
Australia, and it's hot.
Yep. Yeah. One of the guys I work with is in Sao Paulo,
Mhm.
and he's going through the same thing. He's originally from Michigan, where
Okay.
they get tons of snow this time of year. And now he's in Sao Paulo, where he's like, yeah, it's 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm in a t-shirt.
Amazing. But hey, it's great that we are able to speak because on our opposite sides of the world, and
Yeah.
here we are on Zoom, in
Yep.
different climates and even different time zones, which is fascinating. But it's like we're in the same office.
Yeah. 2 different days on the calendar, too. To
Yeah,
me, it's still December 10th.
that's it. That's recording it December 11. So,
Yep.
um, so Ray, I always like to ask the question of the guests that come on the podcast a little bit about background. You were saying just before we press record that your background is in psychology, that you're now in
Mhm.
marketing. So that's a really interesting mix. I'd love you for the audience members just to share a little bit about your background and what kind of led you to get into what you do today, because I'm sure it's a really interesting transition.
Yeah, definitely unexpected. So I set out originally, when we all apply for colleges and, we're dreaming about what we're going to be when we grow up. I set out to be a counselor in the prison system. I
All
grew
right.
up being raised by two police officers and was always in and out of police stations, which were basically my babysitters. And loved the criminal justice world, but I was fascinated by psychology and I didn't want to be an officer or a law enforcer. I wanted to help the people who were finding themselves on the wrong side of the law and help them sort out their lives because I was always of the mindset that, of course, with the exception of extreme situations,
Mm.
that someone going down a criminal path was because of not making right decisions, not seeing other opportunities. And I'm a firm believer in opportunity creation, not just asking for handouts and opportunities, but actually creating them for
Mm.
yourself. And so I really wanted to work in the criminal justice system, helping people and reduce recidivism rates. Well, fast forward through a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's in professional clinical counseling and marriage and family therapy, and a master's in criminology, working in a community counseling center, a drug rehab facility, and a mental hospital. And I completely burned out on the mental health world. I was working at a mental hospital, sitting with a patient who was coming in for the third time. We had already brought him in, done a program for him to help him get off of meth. That was his
Wow.
kind of trap in the world, and discharged him. And he had come back for the third time, facing the exact same challenges. And my supervisor told me, put him through the exact same protocol. And that didn't make any sense to me. Why do we keep putting people through these revolving doors that aren't working?
Mm.
And I just couldn't be a part of that broken system anymore. And so I threw myself full time into what had been my side hustle all through college and grad school and everything, which was freelance writing, and eventually expanded my services year over year. And now we are a full service content marketing agency, 17 years later, doing everything organic and demand generation.
So going through all of that, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of master's degrees there. You'll
Yeah.
have a lot of letters after your
Yes,
name.
absolutely. Yep.
So what was it about? And when you say freelance writing, were you doing copywriting, or you're writing blogs? What got you to do that? Was it just something? Was it an expression, or just something you like doing?
Yeah, it was actually so I did what a lot of freelance writers do, and I went to Google and I said, how to make a living writing. That's what I typed in because
Wow.
I knew I was good at writing. Writing was one of those things where, in high school, if there was an essay, no problem, I got that. If there was a presentation or anything artistic, oh God, no way. That was going to be a huge failure for me, but I could write. And so while I was going to school, I wanted a way to make a living because I had to pay for school, pay for my apartment, pay for all the things.
Yeah.
And eventually that necessity turned into a really lucrative profession for me. And it really started with writing website content and then writing blog content and expanding from there. And there's a huge difference between copy and content creation. And
Mm.
I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time working in both and really figure out what I'm great at, and then also teach my team how to amplify what they're great at. And so now we can kind of run the entire gamut in terms of demand generation marketing.
So when you talk about the difference between copy and content
Mhm.
creation, because when people will listen to this, they might be thinking, "Oh, isn't it the same? Isn't it all?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big mistake that a lot of companies make. So content is meant to inform and educate and connect with people.
Yeah.
And that's meant to be in the top half of your funnel. So brand awareness, building interest, breaking down the fear of the unknown, that should all really be content. Then you use copy, which is meant to be salesy and motivational at the bottom of the funnel. So only when they are getting close to that decision and action stage do you want to use copywriting. And the challenge that I see with a lot of companies, and actually I just started working with a company last year who was really struggling with this problem, where everywhere you saw them online, it was copy, copy, copy. It was sale, sale, sale. It was so high pressure. Their LinkedIn page, their website pages, they were all hardcore selling. And because of that, they were really driving people away.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that's my dog. Let
Your
me let him out.
your dog. Hang on. No, that's all right. What sort of dog is he?
Sorry, I had the mute on. He's a pit bull, and
A
for some
fit.
reason, he heard something outside that he wanted to go bark at. So,
That's
he
nice.
started
Oh,
making
hey,
noises.
this is the authentic. It's the Exceptional Sales Letter podcast. It's very authentic. We have dogs come in. In fact, my dog, I got a border collie, and she's sound asleep outside. So
Oh, being a good girl.
yeah, absolutely. I didn't even hear it. I just noticed you saying, "Oh, there's a dog there."
Oh, you didn't hear him?
Didn't
Oh,
hear
good.
it.
Okay, well, I'm glad because
No,
he was making all kinds of grunty
no,
noises.
no,
He's all disgruntled about something outside.
no. That's cool. So you're saying this company was all salesy.
Yeah, all of their LinkedIn content, everything said, contact us, book a call with us today. It was so sales forward.
Yeah.
And when you're on LinkedIn and when you're trying to rank for blog content for SEO keywords, the people who are finding you, they're not interested in buying from you yet. They're just interested in learning about what you do,
Mm,
learning why you're different, and starting to decide if they even like you or not.
mm,
So, companies thinking that copy and content is the same thing often leads to them putting copy and content in the wrong places and
yeah.
using them for the wrong purposes.
And so that sort of company probably wouldn't have been getting the results that they were hoping for. And then that
Exactly.
potentially leads to desperation. So they do more of the same to try to push an interest out there into the marketplace.
Exactly. Their lead gen was really low. And as a result, they were pushing ads really hard, thinking, oh, we have to get short-term results. We need to get leads in. And it was all about that feeling of desperation.
Yeah.
And so they were channeling 5 figures a month into ads when we all know that's something that is very short-lived. As soon as you turn off the money faucet to ads, they stop performing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you prioritize content, then you're creating something and paying to create that one thing once, and
Mm.
it lives online and gains traction month over month. So every month that goes by, your ROI on that one thing that you purchased, whether it's a lead magnet or a blog or a landing page, is increasing without you having to invest more into it.
So that's an interesting topic because in the sales world and as a coach, as a mentor, as a facilitator, there are a lot of people in my space that are always pumping ads, and you see them on
Hmm.
Instagram, Facebook. I mean, I use LinkedIn a lot. You
Hmm.
see them on TikTok. You play games on your phone, and all of a sudden you see people come up and they're throwing all this stuff at you. Um, People say, oh, the quickest way to gain traction is to invest in generating leads, but
Hmm.
the organic marketing over the long term is probably for many a more viable long term strategy. How do you approach both of those? Because I'm sure there'll be organizations, just as you've described, that are pumping money into ads. They're maybe not getting the short-term stuff, and they think, "Oh, this is failing. There must be something wrong with the advertisements, or dare I say, there must be something wrong with the people that are creating the copy for us, etc., etc." What do you say to them in terms of the balance, if you like, between, I guess, the focus on the paid ads versus the long-term strategy or organic, as you just described?
Yeah, really understanding that ads are a short-term strategy. That is a mindset shift that a lot of marketers need to make in order to make sure that they are making the right decisions because you do want that balance. There's nothing wrong with trying to achieve short-term results, especially if you're in that situation that necessitates it. But you can't expect your marketing team, your sales team, or your business as a whole to be successful long term without some sort of long term sustainable strategy. And if
Mm,
you want a lower cost per lead, cost per close, then you need to make sure that you are building a foundation of a more long term sustainable strategy that can allow you to wean off of the
mm,
need for short term strategies. And it's a really daunting and scary thing for companies to try and make that pivot because the thought is, well, if I channel, let's say I have $10,000 for my marketing budget, and instead of pouring all 10,000 into ads, if I take 5,000 or 6,000 of that and funnel it towards my content marketing and building a more long-term strategy, then oh no, what are we going to do in the short term? That leaves me
mm,
only 4 or 5,000 to work with right now. And that's the bullet that you have to bite
mm,
temporarily. And what a lot of people are scared of is that 3 to 6 month period in between where you have to wait for your long-term strategy to ramp up. But if you can do that, if you can wean yourself down, then in the long run, you're going to have leads that come to you and then not only come to you, but come to your sales team pre-sold.
mm,
So if you want your sales team's conversion rates to increase, then investing in this long-term strategy that gets your leads 80 to 90% pre-sold before they ever speak with a member of your sales team, that is going to amplify the effectiveness of everyone on your team.
It's interesting you say that because there's a lot of research that's been done in industry, in the B2B space, that talks about, I think the latest statistics said something like 57 to 58% of customers is already who are in a buying cycle have already made a decision, a purchasing
Mm,
decision before they
yeah,
interact with the provider of that
yeah,
service or that product. So in order for that to happen, Ray, it adds credibility to what you just said in that the content needs to be working to educate, to provide a service to a marketplace to say, you know what, talk to a problem that they have that I haven't necessarily met the customer yet, but it talks to that particular problem, which adds to a level of credibility. So I'm thinking then
absolutely.
from a strategic point of view, because I'd love to delve into your background in criminology and
Mhm.
psychology, and it's quite unique that you got psychology and marketing together. Although a lot of people say marketing is psychology,
Yeah, it really is. They go hand in hand.
they do. Um,
Absolutely.
what do you say to companies and to people who I guess are trying to penetrate a marketplace that have to fight the short-term elixir
Mhm.
of I've got to get short-term results with the long-term strategy of sustainability? And how does psychology fit into that?
Yeah, so one of the things that is sort of like this kiss of death for companies is when they apply a short-term solution, which I'm not against, but I'm against doing it the wrong way. And the wrong way being they apply a short-term solution that actually hurts their brand. So, for example, if you run ads and the message behind the ads and in between the lines is buy this right now, do this now and spend this money, otherwise you're stupid and you're not a good business manager or CEO or CFO or whomever you're speaking to, or you flat out lie saying exclusive offer just for you, or this is only going to be available on Black Friday, but then actually a week later you see the same deal available for the exact same price.
Yeah.
When you do those things, you are breaking down the trust that people can have with your brand. The alternative is you run ads, you do cold outreach campaigns, you use one of those short-term solutions where you are building trust. You aren't lying. You are trying to really be the provider of a solution
Mm,
where you've identified the problem that the people you're trying to connect with are having, and you have a genuine solution. And you only want to help certain people who fit into the parameters of those who are going to get the maximum benefit of working with you, and you're really trying to form that symbiotic relationship. That's when a short-term solution can actually help improve your brand. And in the long term, when you start doing these things that are focused on being almost altruistic in a
mm,
sense, where you're trying to provide value and really help people with the problems that they struggle with on a day-to-day basis, then ultimately, I love doing post-conversion customer interviews with people because the best thing is when the customer says, "Oh, I chose you guys, even though you're more expensive, I chose you guys because I just like you. You know, I liked you guys more than the other companies I was considering, even though you were more expensive."
yeah.
That's the result. That's what happens when you build trust with people and they just implicitly like your brand because they feel like they've been taken care of by you
Mm.
before they've even handed you a dollar.
It's a great way of describing it because we talk about in selling and certainly in marketing the likability factor. You got to know, you
Mhm.
got to build awareness first. People have to like you, and when I say like, it's likability in terms of do they resonate with you? They don't have to necessarily like you,
Right.
but then trust you, and
Yep.
then what's going to make you memorable to them. So how are they going to be able to remember you? That credibility piece is really important because and it probably goes back to what you were talking about before with that organization putting copy in the wrong spaces to the point
Mhm.
where it felt like you were selling, they were people being sold to versus people love to buy. So I'll
Yeah.
be interested in your research with the post implementation customers feedback. how many of them love to do the purchasing because of they didn't feel like they were being sold to, but they felt like there was going to be value in the exchange and are prepared to pay a premium, and how much of the know, like, and trust factor played into that decision.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's when you have sales calls that don't feel like you're being sold to, you're really having this conversation around, okay, so what's going on? What's actually happening for you and your company? What problems are you guys dealing with? Okay, well, we can help you with this, this, and this. We wouldn't necessarily be able to help you with that, but we can make a recommendation to this other company or this other resource if you wanted to do it in-house. And you're really focused on just getting them what they need.
Mm.
Those are the sales conversations that, in my experience, have always been the most effective.
Yeah.
Alternatively, none of us like to be sold to. Nobody likes to get those LinkedIn messages with a pitch or, the whole like, oh, hey, I just want to expand my network, but actually in 2 weeks you're going to get a sales pitch from me. Nobody enjoys that. So when you're scrolling along and looking for something to distract you or, some new piece of information that you can talk to your friends and colleagues about or just get inspired by for the next hour or so, you want content that's not bonking you over the head with a sales proposition. So
Yeah.
give people what they want.
Yeah. And so, just on that point, right? Because LinkedIn is certainly in the business to business space, it's a huge marketplace.
Yeah.
And if you think about the number of decision makers that sit on the platform, it's an
Mhm.
extraordinary number. But I think it's been, and I use it a lot, but I think it's been used and abused, right? Because you rightly said, and I often get a pitch in a connection request,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
the
it's
most
exhausting,
recent.
right?
It's ridiculous, and the
Yeah.
most recent ones are all podcast marketers, right? Can we
Hmm.
help you expand your podcast and blah blah blah, right? All that sort of stuff. Sometimes what I do though is I'll accept them. I'll look at the profile, and then because I want to know and think about what they're going to do next. I'm really curious
Yeah.
in terms of what they do next. Do they do that? Because you mentioned before, a key part of marketing is cold outreach,
Hmm.
and the marketplace such as LinkedIn is a perfect place for that. So, is there some rules that you work with in platforms like LinkedIn that have a balance between content, building awareness, educating, and sort of building some familiarity and some awareness before the copy comes in? Because you can put content out there that hopefully attract your ideal customer, but there's also has to be an outbound component. That's why organizations still do cold calling. That's why they have
Right.
SDRs, and it works, right? You
Yeah.
just have to go through a lot of pain to get the result. Is there sort of some rules or some guidelines that you work with when you're working with your clients on platforms such as LinkedIn, where they have to build awareness, but at what point do they start it's the copy or the pitch, if you like, or the interest creation?
Yeah, so it's all about layering your priorities and then making sure that you are matching your ratio of content and value versus the actual kind of sales proposition of, hey, book a call with us or let me reach out to you. You need to balance that with your sales cycles. So, for example, in B2B, which is mostly what I do, sales cycles tend to be long. They can
Yeah.
be anywhere from 3 months to 2 years. So when you think about that, if you are putting out a call to action every week, that's too much.
Mm,
Whereas what we do for one of our clients, for example, is we've built up their email list based on LinkedIn connections and based on research and vetting of our SDR lists and things like that. And within that email list, every month we're sending those people content. We're sending
hmm
them helpful, value-driven content. That's it. Let us help you. We think that, someone in your role is probably struggling with this, this, and this. Here's an article that helps you with that problem. That's it.
Yeah.
No call to action, no ask. Then once per quarter, we send out an email saying, hey, if you're ready to talk about switching your CPR training platform and integrating with your LMS, book a call with our salesperson, Andrea,
Mm,
once per quarter.
hmm
And the result of that over the past couple of years has been we have a negligible unsubscribe rate. We have really high open rates. Our open rates, the highest we ever had, our open rates were 64%. The lowest is around 23%.
Okay.
And we have incredible click-through rates, sometimes as high as 17, 18%, which anybody doing email marketing knows a good click-through rate is like a 2 to 3%. So when you focus on making sure that people still want to keep hearing from you because they're not being oversold to, but you're matching the opportunity to
Mm,
sell to them with the length of your sales cycle in a way that feels natural, like, okay, these people probably every 3 months they might be considering a change. They
mm,
might be considering doing something different or timing it depending on the industry. Hey, it's budget time around September, October. Let's send a CTA email out in August and September. Or
yeah.
if you're working in the education system, it might be more like a April, May, June kind of thing. When you match it to the real expectations and experience of the people you're trying to connect with, instead of just hitting them over the head with that CTA all the time, you're much more likely to get a yes.
And it points to credibility as well, because when you think about, I guess, the brand that you have and what you represent, you've got to be really protective of that and consistent with the messaging you put out there
Yeah.
and not be asking for too many things too often. And as you were talking, I'm just thinking there's a few people that literally email me every day. It's on a
Mhm.
list, right? But there's an email that comes in every single day, and every single email is a call to action. Every single one,
Mm,
right? They
yeah,
have the slight different copy, but it's all the same to the point where
right,
I just don't read it anymore. I see it there and I
right,
said, "Oh, it's just another rubbish." It's just it doesn't interest me at all. So it's
right.
about then striking the balance between how do I make the content meaningful, and it has to be meaningful not to me as the person sending it out. It has to be meaningful to the ideal customer. Am I
Exactly.
talking a language that resonates with them? Am I talking about at a problem that either they have, that I know they have, or their industry has, that's going to be valuable? And then at the right time, asking for, hey, are you in the market for this? Is there an opportunity to have this conversation to at least explore?
Right. And I try to aim for this kind of 75, 80% give, 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 and this 20 to 25% ask. And
Mm,
when you do that, one example of this is Neil Patel is fantastic at this. I get a zillion Neil Patel emails. I think maybe sometimes three a day.
wow.
But yeah, a lot. I must be on multiple lists of his. But the vast majority of his emails are really helpful. He's
Yep.
got interesting statistics in there. He's conducting his own research and sharing the findings. He's got a great new video. He's updating me on the Google algorithm. I want to get those emails. And so it doesn't bother me at all
Yeah.
when every 3 to 4 weeks I get one CTA email saying, hey, if you need help with this, my team can help you. And of
Yeah.
course, I'm a competitor of Neil Patel's. I mean, he's a, big guy, big industry, all of that. But so I'm not going to be his ideal customer, but I appreciate the ratio of give, 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 ask.
Yeah. And that's the key thing. And it's a good reminder for salespeople, um, and particularly in business to business, because there are a lot of salespeople in B2B who are under huge amounts of pressure, particularly as we get to what the end of the year. For some, it will be the end
Mhm.
of the financial year. For others, just the calendar year, and they've got pressure to close out the quarter. And then come January 1st, it's like, well, you're back to square zero now, Ray. What are you going to do for this quarter? And so I guess the challenge then is how do we balance the short term need to continue to build sales, marketing, awareness, calls to action, momentum, leads, and the long term strategy that will underpin a sustainable business. And I think what you talked about is really important to have a bit of a balance, but working out how much of it is experimentation though, because it does it change per industry, or is it pretty much the same sort of rule?
I'd say it changes per business.
Yeah, okay.
Even five companies in the same industry offering the same services to theoretically the same targets
Yeah.
are going to have a different experience because every single sales team is going to have a different sales cycle.
Yeah.
Every single one is going to have a different way of closing, a different kind of engagement that they like to start out with before they go into something that's more MRR driven. Every single business is going to be different, and you have to have this really great open conversation between the sales team and the marketing team. And that's one thing I always try to set up in the companies that I consult for is this feedback loop between sales and marketing, because sales and marketing teams often don't get along. They're like the siblings who are constantly in a rivalry. And
They do this.
yet,
They point the fingers.
yes, they're constantly pointing fingers at one another. And yet, they each have what the other needs. The sales team needs marketing to get the brand out there, to drive leads, to drive traffic to the websites, to drive, contact form conversions, all of that. And yet, the marketing team needs the sales team's insights. They need to know what language are people using when you're having sales conversations? What things are they complaining about? When
Yeah.
you ask them, why are you interested in leaving your existing provider? What do they say? You need that information. And so, if you can create more of a harmonious relationship between your sales and marketing teams, then you can tailor your marketing cycles of give, 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 ask
Yeah.
to your unique sales team. And then you can do this amplification of impact in your copy and your content by using exact language that your sales team is picking up on
Yeah.
in your marketing.
Yeah. Because then when you're talking a language that's coming back as a feedback loop, you're almost
Yeah.
verifying that it's not so much that I've heard them, but you're talking a language that resonates with the ideal customer. And that,
Right.
yeah, that builds familiarity. And that's where the psychology comes in because, hey, you get me, you understand me, therefore my level of trust now goes up because you're not just trying to sell me something, you're actually talking a language that does resonate with me. So credibility starts to go up automatically through that
Right.
process.
Right, exactly. And that's the other thing that really impacts B2B decision making, where in B2C, it's often impulse driven.
Yeah.
It's very much like, oh, I want the thing, so I'm going to buy the thing. Or, oh, this might be a great gift idea for so and so, so I'm going to buy it. Whereas B2B is a much more thoughtful decision making process. And another thing that you have to balance in this, perpetual exercise of spinning all these plates is you also have to balance the logic oriented marketing versus the emotion oriented marketing. And the more you can pick up on the exact words that the sales team is hearing, the more you can tap into the emotion side, which is way more elusive, but
Mm,
way more powerful.
yeah. Yeah. Because you look back at the day, and because when I facilitate, I often talk about influence in leadership,
Mm.
and we use Aristotle's the logos, pathos, ethos sort of
Mhm.
three core pillars, and thinking about, and then often we'll talk about JP Morgan and how he used to always talk about the fact that people say do things for two reasons, the right reasons and the real reasons, which is the
Mm.
logical and the real, or the political, cultural, and stuff like that. Understanding that people tend to make decisions around 70 to 75% of the time based on emotion, and they'll support it with
Yeah.
logic. But there are some people who still are very, very logical in terms of, and that comes down to their personal style. So it's having a balance of that and not being too over the top, but also not being too logical. And it's certainly in Australia, if you look back on a number of car manufacturers over the last 10, 15 years, they were all very logical in how they were marketing
Mm.
their products because it was all about the number of airbags they have, what was their safety rating, do they have, what are the features of the car, and none of it was emotion until, and I think it was Jeep that actually came in and created a new slogan, and it was something along the lines of "So you bought a Jeep," and there was no information about the features. It was all about if you had a Jeep, because there was an advertisement that you're out exploring, right? And so there
Yes.
was this
Yes.
emotional attachment to say, oh, if you want to explore, you have to have a Jeep. So that built that emotional attachment. Now, whether the car in fact was a great car, because I've got some friends that thought some of them were a bit lemon, but it had a great effect because it meant people felt connected to something and more likely to take a level of action. So
Yeah.
when you're designing content, when you're working with B2B organizations, is there a ratio that you work with them in terms of making sure you're listening to the right language and using that for their customer base? But the marrying of the logic versus the emotion, is there kind of some rules around that that you tend to work with?
Yeah, so normally when you're trying to balance the logical versus the emotional, it really meshes up really well with the sales funnel. At the top of the funnel, you want to be all about the emotion. When
Yep.
you're talking about brand awareness and interest, and you're trying to draw someone in, you want to tap into that emotion because that is way more magnetic than features and benefits. Just like you're saying with the Jeep example, we have no idea how many airbags are in a Jeep, but we know that Jeep sells adventure. And if
Mm,
I want adventure and I want my life to look like that, then I better really consider buying a Jeep. And then when I start stepping closer to them, because I'm interested, they got me, I'm interested, I want the adventure, only then do I really care about the features and benefits. So, features and benefits are easy. That's the easy thing for companies to list out, put on their website, put on their pricing pages, and all of that. But that is, as you said, what we use to justify the decision that we've already made. I might
mm,
have already decided in my head, oh man, I really want a Jeep. I want a Jeep, but I have to feel good about that decision. And so to reinforce and validate myself, I'm going to look at the features and benefits.
mm.
But if you start with features and benefits at the top of the funnel, you've lost me. I don't care. I
Yeah.
don't care about airbags.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I care that they're there, but I don't care how many there are. So it's not necessarily about a ratio. It's about when do you introduce different information along the conversation. And it
Mm,
has to start with emotion. That's where you're going to create kind of like that sticky fly paper where
mm.
someone's going to spend more time interacting with your brand. And then the features and benefits is what you use towards the end to make them feel good about that decision that they're already leaning towards.
And as you were talking, I'm thinking there was a word that popped up that, and sometimes in sales we don't use this often enough, and that's ethics
Yeah.
and being ethical, because there are organizations out there that perhaps, I'll just say it, they're not as ethical as they probably could be or should be, but
Yeah.
all they're interested in is adding to their bottom line, adding to their revenue stream, et cetera, get the numbers in at the expense of the customer. How much of this is let's make sure that we marry up the values of the organization, what we want to stand for, because in B2B in particular, and you would know this working with a lot of organizations, you're typically not going to be working with one company or one customer as a transaction. There tends to be
Mhm.
more than one transaction. And B2B organizations build their entire business ecosystem on repeat customers, right?
Right.
Coming back. So how much of the ethics comes into this in terms of making sure that we are truthful, we are educating, we are trying to peak an emotion, but not to the point where we're manipulating. But we know we have to ethically influence.
Right, absolutely. And it plays a huge role, especially because while a lot of marketers think that there are four stages of the sales funnel, brand awareness, interest, decision, and action, I think there's five. The
Okay.
last one is retention.
Yep.
And retention doesn't, it's not something that you can exclude from marketing. Even though it takes place after the sale, you still have to make sure that you are creating that positive experience where somebody's going to want to stay with you.
Mm,
And exactly to your point, the more you have a transactional relationship with your clients and customers, the less likely you are to have that retention. Whereas if you create brand loyalty, if you create a sense of community, if you create a sense of, hey, we've really enjoyed working with you for the past couple of years, and if we could do a case study on our working relationship, then we'd love to reward you with XYZ.
mm,
You can create this sort of ongoing symbiotic mutual benefit. And ultimately, what ends up happening is you can use that example of working with that client to get other clients who are in the exact same industry and the exact same place that that one was when you started. And
mm.
then additionally, they could be word of mouth referral partners for you that are just going to amplify your brand reputation. And so if you go into the marketing thinking, I don't just want a transaction. I don't just want, a one-time hookup or a single date. I really want a long-term
Yeah.
relationship. That shapes everything, and ethics has to be the foundation of that because the second you do something wrong to a client, whether it's use a disingenuous word or phrase, or the salesperson says, oh yeah, we'll do this for you, but then on the other end it's, oh no, actually that's not in your service agreement, so we're not going to do that for you. The second you burn your client, that bridge is gone and you
Yeah.
lose all of that mutual benefit.
It's it's a good point you make because I've seen this happen a lot where um, salespeople have made promises that the business can't
Yeah.
fulfill,
Yeah.
and they literally, and this is where I guess the sales, marketing, fulfillment arms of the business need to work a lot closer together,
Mhm.
and where ethics come in. And it doesn't just damage the brand of the sales team, but it damages the brand of the organization. So, well, I'm not quite sure I can trust you guys because this salesperson said, yeah, we can do that. And now they're not taking responsibility. They're making it somebody else's fault. And
Right.
you're actually behind the eight ball there. So getting everybody on the same page, but also making sure that what you're putting out there and what you're educating the market on and what offers you can make are all ethical and you can fulfill them. Because I often say to sales teams that the sale doesn't start until after the sale is made. So just don't look at it as a short-term thing. You've now got to earn the trust and respect of your customer, deliver on your promises, and make them want to come back for more. Right?
Yeah.
That's what you've got to do.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is it costs so much money to get a single client, a single customer. Why wouldn't you want to set that relationship up for success from the very get-go so
Mm,
that, yeah, maybe they start with your smallest offering,
yeah,
but then in a year or 2 years, they've doubled or tripled their contract with you
yeah,
and they're your biggest fans.
yeah.
That's what you need for long-term success. That is sustainable. And that's where you're really going to get your ROI. The
Mm.
more you focus on quotas and conversions and just the transactional numbers, the more it's going to hurt you in the long run.
So on that point, because I want to ask you specifically about your elite method as well.
Mhm.
On that note, what do you find with organizations that you work in the B2B space on in relation to that trying to marry up, or how much of a role do you play in educating them on, I guess, that balance between the short term and the long term sustainability? Because it's
So,
I guess to some degree it's your reputation on the line as well, isn't it?
mhm. Yeah, very much so. Where if I'm suggesting, okay, so this is actually funny because we recently had a situation with a client that we've been working with where at the beginning they were all in. Yes, long-term demand generation, we're all for it. We can be patient. We can wait the 6 to 9 months for it to really start getting traction, between the time it takes to create all the content, to optimize it, for Google to start seeing it, and
Yeah.
then for it to be so prolific that we're really starting to see that J curve tip up. And then the business strategy completely shifted 3 months
Hmm.
in. So we basically had to go back to the drawing board on who are we talking to? How are we trying to reach them? What are we saying to capture their attention? What is our unique selling position? Because that changed as well. And we did all of that work. And then we started off on that track again. And 3 months later, they invented a new huge change within the business. Now, granted, I do think that these changes within the business were good decisions and they were beneficial, but we were starting from ground zero every single time they made a new change. And so there's this transparency that has to exist between marketing and the people who are driving the bigger business decisions, as well as the sales team,
Yeah.
because it wasn't just hurting marketing, it was hurting the sales team as well, because they had to relearn everything about these new offerings and the new positioning and the new target audience. Everything was different. So when companies are going through these growing pains, we have to reset expectations. And
Mm.
that's why it is good to have some short-term strategies in your back pocket. For example, even though what my team and I do is purely organic and demand generation focused, we do have a ton of referral partners who we recommend for LinkedIn ads and cold email outreach and list building. And they're phenomenal at what they do, and they do it
Yeah.
in a very ethical way. But then you need to combine those strategies in a way that's going to get you what you need short term for the business while also allowing that room, that timeline of that 6 to 9 months for
Mm.
your demand generation to get up and running.
And it makes it really challenging and frustrating then if you've got an organization that changes their strategy.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
oh, we've got a new quarter, we've got a new strategy, new idea, and the sales force will think, oh, here we go again.
Right.
That's be
And
really
and it's hard when, especially as a marketing professional, I believe in the change that they're making. I think it's going to be a great way for them to introduce themselves to the market,
Yeah.
but also it's going to hinder my KPIs. It's going to make my timelines look much longer than I had set
Yeah.
out for them to be in the beginning. And
Yeah.
so we really have to ask ourselves the hard questions within these leadership meetings around what is the priority.
Mm.
If the priority is sales, do not change things. Let us keep going and let us get this up and running. If the priority is completely transforming who you are in the marketplace and really taking on that stance of a thought leader that has something valuable to revolutionize the industry, let's do it. I am all
Yeah.
for it. But no, you're adding 3 months to my timeline.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, it's a good point. One of the things I was intrigued about around talking to you was this concept of the elite method, um, and how you can get it to. I mean, we talked about it a little bit in terms of getting buyers to almost be pre-qualified and before they
Yes.
want to do business with you, and part of that's going to be when they're in their buying cycle. Can you just talk a little bit about I guess, the context and the concept of the elite method?
Yeah, absolutely. So within the elite method, it's this very self-reflective and also extrospective process where you need to take this good hard look at who we are as a company and not just who we are in the sense of who we want to be and who HR says that we are on our careers page and things like that. But really, when you're inside the bottle, it's very hard to read the label. So you need to work with somebody who's outside the bottle and can see, hey, what you guys are putting out there, it's portraying this image or it's actually giving this impression, and really not having an ego
Mm.
about what the interpretation of what you've been putting out has
Yeah.
been, and course correcting into what you actually want people to perceive, because that is often a very different thing. When you look at, okay, what do we want to say about our company? That's often a very different thing compared to what do people want to hear? What do
Yeah.
they actually need? What do they
Mm.
need help with that we can help solve for them? So there's that introspection aspect. And then there's the introspection within the person you're trying to connect with and really examining what's going on in their heads, what's going on in their day-to-day lives, what's keeping them up at night. And that's the part that I just absolutely love nerding out on, because that's where you start to get people 80, 90% pre-sold. When you can understand the psychology, the emotions that are going on for them at every single stage of change. So the stages of change model is a theoretical concept, a framework that is often used in substance abuse counseling, where we're trying to get people to change addictive behaviors, things that are, they've got an uphill battle ahead
Mm.
of them, but we want them to change. How can we help make that a more gradual, successful process that's going to be a lifelong concrete choice?
Yeah.
We want the same thing to happen in sales and marketing, right? We want them to go from the solution that they're currently in or the lack of a solution
Mm.
to changing, meaning spending money with your company, changing their systems, changing their training, changing their company culture. That's a huge ask. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so if we break down that experience into the stages of change model and we identify what's going on internally for them within the pre-problem stage, the pre-problem awareness stage, problem awareness, brand and solution awareness, consideration, evaluation, decision, action, and then getting into the retention phases, we can actually create content for every single internal neurological experience that we want them to have.
Mm.
And that is what gets them pre-sold. By the time they've actually gotten to the part where they need to talk to a salesperson, they already have all the information they need to make a decision.
Mm.
They're just going to ask a few logistical questions and you're done,
Yeah.
because you've done the work of making that change process so much easier on them. Suddenly, they're not afraid of the unknown. There is no question mark in their head about what does it look like on the other side once they have my money. You've
Mm.
addressed all of those fears and concerns, and your competitor hasn't.
Yeah.
Who do you think they're going to choose?
That's it. And this can all be done through, I guess, the content that you put out and linked
Mhm.
then with the copy at the right time.
Yeah, it's all about creating a seamless experience for the people you're trying to help based on that altruistic value add of give, give, give,
Yeah,
ask. So
yeah,
it's going to be a little different for everyone, but an example that's pretty common is, okay, let's create LinkedIn content. That's very top of funnel. Let's match that up with poking at the problem to get people to become aware that there's a problem. And then matching that up with some kind of inbound traffic offer, whether that's SEO, sometimes PPC is helpful at this point, but often lead magnets that drive people back to your website, landing pages from ads, things like that,
yeah,
where you're now bringing them into your ecosystem. Then, if you're offering a resource and you get them into your email marketing sequence, matching the tags of segmentation with the stages of change and putting the right messaging in front of people to get them to switch from one stage to the next
mm,
and kind of leapfrogging them through those stages and adjusting the tags as they go, depending on if they engage or not.
yeah.
That is a very simplified example of how you can start to place the right message in the right place to bring people along in that journey.
Because as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, oh, does that mean we have to customize it to every potential customer? You probably do it in I guess in batches and say, well, we know that this is the change process. We know we have to go through and build awareness. We know we have to give value before we can earn the right to ask them to take some form of action. But you then have to just sit back and not so much pray, but have belief that the messaging that we're creating, the value that we're giving, will resonate with a certain percentage of the market that we're looking to attract, and have confidence that they will, at the right time, take a level of action when they're ready to take that level of action.
Right. And there's no situation in marketing where I'm ever going to say, just sit back and pray because that the last step of my elite model method, that last E is enhance. And this is where that feedback loop between sales and marketing comes in so handy because if we're finding that, okay, we're doing great in terms of our LinkedIn engagement, and we're doing great in terms of our website traffic, and we're doing great in terms of our lead magnet forms being converted, but our email open rates are awful or our
Mm,
click-through rates are awful. Well, now we know exactly where we need to focus our effort in
yeah.
improving the funnel. And then when we talk to sales and we understand, okay, when you talk to people who seem like they're struggling with this part of the buying process, what do you find is most effective? What do you find isn't effective at all? And let's take some of the insights that you're gathering and use them in this
Mm,
part of the marketing process to pre-do your work for you.
yeah.
Then we can start moving people along. And you can create different funnels and segments based on if you're going after different industries, a lot of salespeople like to go after specific verticals and niche down in that way. Or
Yeah.
if you're doing something that is seasonal, you can always have seasonal funnels. But it's all about taking that feedback and enhancing what we've created because then the only place to go from there is up.
Mm, totally. Totally. No, it's a very good point. So as we bring this to a close, I know dinner's probably waiting for you. We're coming
Probably,
towards,
fingers crossed.
yeah. Well, you said before we press record, your husband's a culinary expert, so he's probably going
Yes.
to do some sort of chef de jour creation.
Yes, I'm excited.
Um, as we look at the end of 2024, 2025, is there anything that you see on the horizon from a B2B space that sales organizations, people who are looking to influence should be either conscious of or really looking to leverage into 2025?
Yeah, I think, and this holds true every single year, but what has worked in the past is not going to work in the future. The only thing that truly works in B2B sales is relationship building. That is the only constant. Every other trick, every other tactic, it wears out because buyers become savvy. And
Mm,
when we are trying to approach sales and marketing without that ethos, without any kind of ethics or, you know, without the focus on building a long-term relationship and instead on being too transactional, that's when our other ideas and strategies and tactics just end up falling flat in the
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah.
But if you always come back to relationship building and you always come back to doing the right thing and treating people the way that you would want to be treated if
Mm.
you were out there purchasing some kind of B2B solution,
Yeah.
that is never going to die. That is always going to be the crux of a successful and sustainable sales strategy.
I love that. And you said it a number of times. It's the give, 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 then ask,
Yeah,
not the ask,
yeah.
ask, ask, and only give when you get.
Exactly, exactly. You have to be, it's, I think a salesperson has to be altruistic in order to
Mm.
be successful. And that's so contrary to what a lot of salespeople are taught. They're
Yeah.
taught manipulation and get the conversion, and your family depends on your bonus. And, they're taught to be so self-serving. But the weird thing that happens is when you stop focusing on yourself and you start focusing on others outside of you. And this isn't just in sales, this is just in life.
That's
Things
it.
end up flowing back to you tenfold, and you end up becoming inexplicably to your peers the most successful salesperson they'll ever meet.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It is, and that's a great way to finish. And I think it's a lesson for all of us, really. And it's not just in sales; it'll be in marketing, it'll be in influencing executives. It's in life, right? When you're dealing with
Yeah.
people, don't make it about you.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Make it all
Awesome.
about them and how can you solve their problem, even if it
Totally.
means you're not going to get paid for it.
Yeah,
Even
absolutely.
if
But it's
it,
the right thing to do, right?
exactly.
Um, and there's lots of people that we hear that the how you treat people who you might have power over and they can do nothing for you, but how you treat that person at that moment says a lot about you in terms of your
Yeah,
your character. So it's
absolutely.
yeah, give. I love that. I love that. So Ray, hey, I love this conversation. I'm holding you from your dinner. So I thank you for coming onto the podcast. People who are wanting to connect with you and learn more about what you do, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, visit us on our website, cornellcontentmarketing.com. And if you want to kind of start applying some of these concepts, there's a brainstorming toolkit that I offer for free. You can do all of the things that I'm talking about, including building out your stages of change matrix for free within your own teams. Just you can do this right now. Go to cornellcontentmarketing.com/demand gen kit, and you'll get that free download. Use it, leverage it. You guys are going to rock it.
Demand Gen Kit, all one word.
Yes.
Brilliant, awesome. Um, Ray, again, thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming in on a Tuesday evening. Greatly appreciate you being a guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All the best. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.